First off, I want to thank everyone for coming this evening. I know some of you had to drive a ways, and we really appreciate you coming out here. My name is Danielle. I spoke to most of you on the phone. I work for True Health Center for Functional Medicine, who is the one who's hosting this evening. First off, I want to go over a few housekeeping items. Please hold all your questions during the presentation. We will have a Q&A at the end. There is a notepad in your goodie bag, so if you have any questions, you're welcome to write them down, and we'll answer them at the Q&A. Keep an open mind. I know for some of you it may be some new information, some of you it may be old information, but if it is new, we welcome you to join us through this journey. And then just relax. This presentation is to inform you on Bredesen and functional medicine and everything included in that. And then lastly, please silence your cell phones, or you will be fined, and I don't take anything less than a $20 bill. All right. So first off, to make sure that everyone is on the same informative playing field, we're going to watch two short videos. The first one's 8 minutes. The second one's 3 minutes. The videos are about functional medicine, Dr. Bredesen, and Dr. Bredesen's protocol to make sure everyone is on the same ground level as we head into the seminar. So why don't we go ahead and start?
For those people who aren't totally familiar with your work, can you give sort of like a high-level overview of what you've been able to do with your protocol and your research?
Right. So we've been interested for 30 years now in what is it that actually drives Alzheimer's disease. You know, we were told that Alzheimer's disease is mysterious, you can't prevent it, you can't delay it, and you can't reverse it. Well, the problem is that people have not looked at large enough data sets. So we're looking at all of the reasons, and this fits beautifully what we've been doing in the test tubes for 30 years, studying Alzheimer's and Alzheimer's, our fruit fly model, all these other models. I have to say, I didn't think I would ever get back to seeing a human being again. But studying these things, what we found is that you can actually look, if you take the right series of genetic and biochemical tests, you can see why you are having cognitive decline that we call Alzheimer's disease. Immediately what you can see is Alzheimer's is not one disease. You can see very clear subtypes. So we developed an algorithm where you can now say this person has 70% type 1, 20% type 1.5, and 10% type 2, for example, or type 3, 4, 5, etc. So we can see very clear subtypes, and then you can see what to do about it. And so we started this back in 2011. We actually proposed the first comprehensive trial for early Alzheimer's, which was going to be done in Australia, and we were turned down. They said, look, you obviously don't understand how to do clinical trials because you're asking to change more than one variable. We said to the IRB, well, you obviously don't understand Alzheimer's disease because it's not a one variable disease. So we are all doing things, and they fit very much within the functional medicine realm, that contribute. And we identified initially 36 different things that all contribute to the molecular pathways that lead to what we ultimately, the pathologists really call it Alzheimer's disease. But it is cognitive decline associated with a specific pathology. So we told people, look, imagine you have 36 holes in your roof. You take a drug, it covers one hole. It covers it really well, but it's only one hole. You got 35 left. You're going to have a problem. So we started telling people, look, you need to do all the holes. And when they do that, we saw unprecedented improvements, reversals in cognitive decline. We published the first 19. We have several hundred people now who are on this with unprecedented improvements. And we get these, we've had over 5,000 emails. We hear from people every week who are getting better. And what we found is that what we're doing fits in beautifully with what functional medicine is all about. So we found out what we're doing fits in beautifully with what Jeffrey and Mark and David and Sarah and all the various people who've been working all these years in functional medicine have the right approach that fits beautifully with what we've seen in the test tube over the last year.
I want to just go into that for a moment because you've got the functional medicine community here. You've got doctors like Mark Mendelacino. You've got Rongan, I know, has been out to train with you and to understand what's really going on. What is it about a functional medicine doctor that makes them uniquely equipped to deliver this kind of care?
Yeah, and you mentioned Mark Mendelacino is a very good example. So Mark, when he's looking at what is actually causing it, he's not saying the way, if you go to an Alzheimer's clinic, what they will tell you is, you have Alzheimer's, we don't know what causes it, and it's not going to get better. We're going to give you a drug, Aricept or Namenda, which is going to make a very, very small difference, but doesn't change the trajectory. You may get a bump up, you'll continue down. When Mark sees someone, when functional physicians see someone who have cognitive decline, they do appropriate tests that are actually focused on the biochemistry of what's driving it. So instead of saying you have Alzheimer's disease, 21st century medicine is saying you have type 1.5 MCI, for example, due to specific genetics, maybe due to your HLA-DRDQ interacting with a specific mycotoxin exposure. You can see all the players, so you can actually get at the root cause. And if you think about it, it makes perfect sense. Why would you try to trick nature and go downstream with a drug? We know it doesn't work. Monotherapies for complex chronic illnesses do not work. So one of the things we're really interested in is essentially bridging what we call the complexity gap. Think about it for a minute. I don't know if anyone came here in a driverless car or flew here in an airplane. The computer flies the airplane, drives the car. Any sort of task, your iPhone, any of these things do, you have to match the complexity of the computer program with the complexity of the task. It's only in medicine where we have these unbelievably complex systems. Humans are incredibly complex. The genome, 3.3 billion base pairs, is just the tip of the iceberg. That's the simplest part. The lipidome, the proteome, the metabolome, on and on and on. So you have this incredibly complex organism. And what sort of a data set do we gather? Sodium, potassium, a couple of things. So there's this huge complexity gap which doesn't exist anyplace else. If you tried to fly a plane and you had that little information, you'd crash every time. So the goal here is to develop better and better algorithms so that we can say, look, here's why you got this problem, be it type 2 diabetes, osteoporosis, congestive heart failure, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, Lewy body, what have you, and we're just starting to go from Alzheimer's to some of these others. And then you can get at what the actual causes are. And it just happens, it fits beautifully with what the pioneers like Jeffrey and Mark and others have put together over the last 25 years.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I guess, the last question that I want to ask, this show is called The Evolution of Neurology.
Yeah.
So in your mind, what is the evolution of neurology?
Right. So to me, this is a really exciting time. And it's hard to realize that when you're in the middle of it. But I don't know how many people here went into neurology, but the fact of the matter is, you remember making fun of the people who are interested in neurology when we were in medical school. Why? Because we're really good at diagnostics and we're really lousy at therapeutics. So as they say, the national flower of the neurologist is the hedge. So, this is, right, and so neurologists are known for pontificating, but not helping anybody. This has been the problem. This is why I went into the laboratory for all those years. But for the first time, we can actually make a difference. And so this is the era. I mean, again, it's so hard to see when you're in the middle of history. We are in, literally, neurologically speaking, we are in the fourth inning of a perfect game. So all of us are part of history. It's the part of history of functional medicine. This is a real revolution. When have we ever been able to reverse cognitive decline in Alzheimer's before? When have we ever been able to do that? Lou Gehrig's is next, and on and on and on. So, yeah. So this is we are all in the middle of a historical event that is going to be taking place over the last few years and the next couple of decades. And we will all emerge from that, where Alzheimer's will be and it should be, a very, very rare disease.
Beautiful. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Dale Bredesen.
All right, now we're going to go into the second video, which is only 3 minutes long, and it explains what the Bredesen Protocol is.
Of the over 318 million people in the United States, 45 million are expected to develop Alzheimer's disease during their lifetimes. MPI Cognition is the first to use a transformational protocol to reverse cognitive decline in Alzheimer's disease and its precursors. Healthcare is currently undergoing a transformation from 20th century medicine to 21st century medicine. 20th century medicine relies on small data sets for traditional diagnoses, which do not answer the question of why the illness is present. This one-size-fits-all approach has been thus far unsuccessful in treating chronic illnesses such as Alzheimer's disease. This brings us to the transition to 21st century medicine, which uses large data sets for diagnoses and helps identify changes in the network of the human body that characterize chronic illness. We can reveal the why for each individual and address the cause of each condition in a comprehensive, personalized, and pragmatic way. This transition combines the best of Western medicine and Eastern medicine practices. Using the 21st century approach, we have found that treating Alzheimer's is analogous to repairing a roof with 45 holes. Treating the disease requires addressing many aspects of the body at one time, as you would when repairing holes in a roof. The more holes you cover, the more success you will have at fixing the problem. The current pharmacological approach is focused on developing a drug to combat Alzheimer's. If we were to create a single drug specific to Alzheimer's, it would have to perform so many different functions that it would be unlike any drug ever developed. While the single pill approach may not be a viable option, by knowing the characteristics of the disease, we can address the underlying problem and patch 45 factors, or holes as we referred to them in our earlier analogy. This approach is the cornerstone of the Bredesen Protocol. Interacting with and covering many of the factors we have identified thus far leads to unprecedented results. For example, over the course of 2 years, a 71-year-old participant of the Bredesen Protocol has increased his verbal learning test score from less than the 5th percentile to greater than the 80th percentile. His auditory delayed memory score also saw significant improvement. It went from less than the 15th percentile to greater than the 75th percentile, and the list goes on. The combination of large data sets, genetic data, the underlying biochemistry, and the concept of 21st century health has contributed to the formation of the Bredesen Protocol, the first proven method to reverse the effects of early Alzheimer's disease.
Now, are you ready? Yes. So, I'm going to go and do a quick introduction for our first speakers. Our medical directors, Dr. Christine Burke and Dr. Mark Holthaus. Both are board certified in family medicine, integrative medicine, functional medicine, and of course, the Bredesen Protocol. Dr. Burke spent 5 years as Chief of Family Medicine at Mercy in Folsom, and Mark Holthaus is Assistant Professor at Loma Linda University. And we're also excited because this is a consecutive year for Style Reader's Choice winners for our doctors. So we're very excited again to have that award. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce Dr. Burke and Dr. Holthaus.
Okay, no reverb. I'm going to stay back here. Hi, everybody. How are you? Are you comfortable? Good. All right. No one's too cold, too hot. If you are, let us know. Raise your hand. Someone back. So we're honored to be here to present something that's very near and dear to our hearts. I've had some personal experience in my own family with this disease, as has Dr. Burke. And so most of us, if we talk to our neighbors, our friends, our family, have had some either direct or very near indirect connection to this ailment. And in 25 years of family medicine, I've been fairly ineffective other than what a lot of us have, which is a couple of drugs. And it's very daunting, and it's a very emotional diagnosis because you feel like there is no hope. One of the things that we want to talk about is the differences between the past few years and what's more relevant with Dr. Bredesen's new information, and that's really why we're all here tonight. There's been this past experience where you present to the neurologist and you're given this diagnosis, which is really like a death sentence. It's a very terminal, very depressive feeling where there's a couple of medications that might be offered, but really no hope as far as any kind of a change in the trajectory of the disease. What we want to emphasize is the fact that there have been all of these drugs, literally hundreds of them, that have gone through phase 1, 2, and 3 clinical trials, and we've had 1 or 2 that have been effective. In fact, we have a whole graveyard to represent these 243 out of 244 that have failed to make it through clinical trials. And this is all based on the one drug, one disease model that our paradigm here has been based on. And it just doesn't work, like Dr. Bredesen says very well, with chronic diseases. Acute care, different story. So if you focus on one aspect of a chronic illness, like getting rid of the amyloid plaque, which we find in the brains of people that have had Alzheimer's, we're finding that the results don't always match what our expectations are. And that's what a lot of these clinical trials have shown, is that there's just not the expected result. And it's been highly expensive and highly frustrating. Some of these drugs, the research folks didn't believe the results. So you'll see ×2 on a couple of these drugs. They actually did the testing over again because they couldn't believe that it didn't work. And it was because they were focused on this one drug magic bullet technique. You know, in modern medicine, a lot of times when we're looking for chronic illness, not unlike Alzheimer's disease, we're digging ourselves into more trouble by trying to deal with symptoms only and not going upstream for root cause.
So Dr. Bredesen talked a little bit about the disruption in the system, and his research has shown us that it is really very clear that Alzheimer's disease in particular, and much of chronic disease, is multifactorial. So multiple things have to go wrong for the body to lose its ability to compensate in that area. And that's why focusing on one thing leads us with little or no improvement. So don't freak out. We're not gonna make you learn biochemistry tonight. What I really want you to take home from this, which is a picture of a neuron, is that there are a whole lot of different things like vitamin D and hormones and growth factors that the brain needs, and cholesterol that we have to have not only for the neurons to function and to be able to send a signal from one nerve to the next, but also to be able to repair themselves and to be able to grow new connections. And that's a really critical part of reversing cognitive decline. So Dr. Bredesen has identified that the systems biology approach, which is what functional medicine is rooted in. So functional medicine looks to understand what went wrong. Why is this body developing a disease? Why do we have this? And what's wrong in the different systems that every cell, every tissue, every organ has to be able to do, like being able to assimilate nutrients, being able to defend and repair itself, being able to communicate. All of those things are the same whether you're a heart cell or you're a nerve cell. So when those basic functions start to fail for whatever that variety of different holes are, that's when we start to see breakdown, and that's what happens in impacting the brain health. So the problem with neurodegenerative disease is not just structural. So this is a healthy brain, and it looks much fuller because it's full of not only more neurons, but more connections between those neurons. And this is an advanced Alzheimer's brain where so many of those connections have been lost that the brain atrophies. This is a functional scan, so we're looking at not just what does the brain look like, but how is it working. So in the normal brain, the red areas are the areas where there's a lot of activity in the brain. And over here in the Alzheimer's brain, you can see that we've lost lots of activity, both in the upper picture and in the lower picture. So we lose connections, and then we lose the ability to get from one place to another. So that loss of being able to remember where something is or what you've done is because that highway, that nerve connection is lost. And in the same way, if you lose a road connecting one city with another, you can't get there anymore. So we have to rebuild that infrastructure. So you heard in the first video the roof was 36 holes. In the second video you heard the roof was 45 holes. Now Dr. Bredesen says we're approaching 80 holes. And Jessica, our nurse practitioner that I'll introduce in a minute, just told us that they've added 10 more data points on the RECODE report as of this week. So this is rapidly evolving science that just is getting better and better. So we have to look at why did Alzheimer's develop in this person, not just saying this is what you have and this is what drug you need to take.
So that attitude works great for pneumonia. Chest x-ray says you have an infiltrate, which is the doctor's word for a white spot in your chest x-ray. Here's the drug, and it works. Very different from chronic illness. So functional medicine, great discussion. I love it. Dr. Bredesen early realized, though, that it was really a systems biologic approach where you've got like a spider web, all these things that are interconnected. And you have to take all of these things, these large data sets, into account. That's what makes this complicated. And so the group of physicians and practitioners that seemed most suited, that sing this battle cry every day at work of systems connection, is the functional medicine trained doctor. So he's discussing now the fact that really they're the only people he's willing to train that have this understanding of complexity and not one disease thinking. And in fact, he's exclusively certifying functional medicine doctors along with the Institute for Functional Medicine, who is the body, basically, it's a not-for-profit that's dedicated to training practitioners in the art of functional medicine. Dr. Burke and I are lucky to be on the faculty of IFM, and it's a wonderful honor. So you heard Dr. Burke mention the RECODE report. This is what it looks like. What it is basically is a subtyping of the different types of Alzheimer's disease after taking loads of questions from you as a history, images of your brain, both MRI and in some cases functional imaging, in addition to a whole bunch of labs that you wouldn't get at an ordinary doctor's physical. And we basically take all that data and we come out with this report. And this is what you're basically, part of what you're paying for the Bredesen Protocol is this report. We get this and it tells us, do you have an inflammation problem that's largely your personal window to what might be causing, again, the why of your Alzheimer's disease or your dementia. And this can be in a preventive arena as well. Before you're way down the course of severe dementia, you could have just some early symptoms. These same kinds of results can be produced. We're looking at inflammation, we're looking at vascular issues where there's lack of blood flow to the brain. There is problems also with, as Dr. Burke recommended or referenced, problems with micronutrients and hormone deficiencies. So we look at that. Glucose imbalances, glycotoxicity, that's the type 1.5, is a big problem in our culture where you've got a lot of pre-diabetes and what we call insulin resistance. It's toxic to the brain. We call this type 3 diabetes. So, back to you.
Our little Sonny and Cher duo. So why our center for this process? Well, Dr. Holthouse and I, as he mentioned, are a couple of the few that have been certified in this protocol. And we received our training actually directly with Dr. Bredesen. In fact, in both of those videos, we were chuckling over here because we saw the backs of our heads, and in a couple of different shots, we're like Dr. Bredesen groupies now. But we were fortunate to be able to go actually to the Buck Institute for Aging Research in Nevada and receive our training there. And then our physician's assistant, Mark Fierro, who's over here, and our nurse practitioner, Jessica Santos, both also received their training with Dr. Bredesen directly. So all of us have been with him learning how to administer this program. These guys are an integral part of our team. It is their role to gather the massive amounts of data. He talked about needing big data. It's a lot of data. It's their role to gather all of that data so that we can synthesize it through Dr. Bredesen's algorithm.
Cornerstones are things that are anchor slides. This is the most important slide we think in the presentation because it's the high-level information you want to leave with. This is a lifestyle program. Don't let us fool you in any way. We want you, if you remember nothing else, to leave here thinking, knowing that this is a lifestyle program. And food as medicine is a huge point on that. And it's not just macronutrients, what you get from eating your whole foods, but the micronutrients that you're receiving there. Clean water, clean air. Toxins are a huge issue. So when we talk about food as medicine, I'm assuming it's clean foods, it's organic, and we can talk about those things more later. Sleep. Sleep is when you do your repair work, and if you're not doing good sleep, you're not repairing, you're not recovering from the day's activities. This is the time where the body clears itself, the brain in particular, of its toxins. And so this is super important. Movement's important. We know that activity is how you make some of the trophic growth factors to keep your nerve connections, Dr. Burke alluded to, and your nerve cells themselves alive and healthy. And mind-body, stress is a big thing. It creates all kinds of problems, including cortisol, which perpetuates atrophy, shrinking of the part of the brain that we're talking about tonight. And then hormone balance. There's a lot of buzz out there about bioidentical hormones and are my hormones out of whack. And so stress management feeds into this whole discussion. It's not just sex hormones like estrogen and testosterone, but it's things like thyroid and then vitamin D, which is truly a hormone. So step one, we really want to figure out what are the factors that are causing the loss of your nerve cells prematurely, robbing you of the quality of the life that you could potentially have. Mark Fierro, my PA, is famous for coming up with acronyms, and I give him a hard time. But he came up with one that I thought was particularly ingenious this last couple weeks and shared it with me. SEEDS, just like seeds, SEEDS. The first S stands for sleep. The first E is exercising the brain. The second E is exercising the body. D is for diet. And I think the last S is stress management. At least that's what I made it tonight. Did I get it? All right, I get the thumbs up. All right. So if you remember nothing else, remember cornerstones and seeds. Seeds will get you the important salient points. So we want to introduce the whole team. We gave some verbal to our nurse practitioner, Jessica Santos, and to our PA, Mark Fierro. We want you to meet the rest of the team because this is a team. The True Health Center for Functional Medicine has physicians, physician's assistants, nurse practitioners, dietitians, and health coaches. And without them, we can't do the seeds work. So I want to introduce them right now, and I'm going to go ahead and let you guys introduce yourselves as you get up to speak, one by one if you don't mind. Christina Lebeau is our RD, our dietitian. She's been with us a long time, and she's particularly good at reaching people, and so I'm proud to introduce you, Christina.
Thank you very much, Dr. Holthaus and Dr. Burke. Hello, everyone. It's nice to see some familiar faces. And so, as Dr. Holthaus said, I'm the registered dietitian. If you have any trouble hearing me, let me know. But I have the wonderful pleasure of speaking to all of you about food. And it plays such a critical role in cognition and brain health. And I'll touch on the aspects and how it can even improve memory, too, if anyone's experiencing cognitive decline. Oh, perfect. All right, so here we go. So how many of you have heard of the Nigerian paradox? No one? Okay. So in Nigeria, and then in this country, they have this very interesting phenomena where a majority of the population have this gene type, ApoE4. Some of you might be familiar with it. And this gene is one of the strongest risk factors for Alzheimer's disease. So by having this gene, we would expect that they would have a proportional diagnosis of Alzheimer's dementia, but yet we don't see this. And so why is that happening? Well, the answer lies in their nutrition. They primarily eat a plant-based diet. They eat a lot of fiber and low animal fats. And that is one of the primary messages that I've really woven into my talk, and that is really at the core of what I do, but as a team, that food is medicine. It's much, much more than calories. I know that's what we hear predominantly in conventional medicine and from our nutrition guidelines, that a food just boils down to calories. So you can see here on this slide, so we have in the very center energy. Yes, food does provide energy for the body, but it provides much more than just that. So food is information. It has the different nutrients actually communicate to our DNA and to our genes, switching genes on and off. And that's where we can have something like the Nigerian paradox. And there's even a field, nutrigenomics, if any of you have heard about it, where we're really studying how nutrition does play such an important role in turning genes off. So if a person has a chronic disease, we can actually reverse it using food. And then food is medicine, of course. We'll touch more on this in the next few slides on how this works exactly. Food is medicine. All right, so we're going to pretend that this apple and cookie, they're both 100 calories. So if they're both 100 calories, they should, when we eat them, they should affect us the same way. But we know that's not the case. So this apple, it has nutrients in it that make our cells sparkle. It has quercetin in the skin, which is anti-inflammatory and anti-allergy. It also has 2 different types of fiber, one that feeds your gut bacteria, which is really critical to gut health. And also, because it's perfectly packaged, nature's food, the natural sugars occurring in this apple, it has fiber to buffer it so it doesn't break down so quickly and elevate your blood sugar levels and insulin levels after eating it. But this cookie, on the other hand, so we know it's loaded with sugar, white sugar that's been added, and flour that's been added to it as well, and in the wrong types of fats. So by eating this cookie, it quickly breaks down. This is going to be driving inflammation. And so every time you eat, we have all these wonderful opportunities to choose something that is going to nourish us and reduce inflammation, or something that will actually drive inflammation. And so on these next slides too, I really want to highlight even the pigments, the different colors that we find in fruits and vegetables that you don't find in animal products or in meat. And I don't know if you've ever thought of it this way, but plants, they're fixed outside. They cannot go indoors to hide from the sun when they're too hot. They can't apply sunscreen. So they have to have a way of protecting their DNA from the harmful effects of UV radiation. And that's found in the pigments. The pigments have the antioxidants, the phytonutrients. And we really, when we don't eat enough color, we really rob our body of all these amazing benefits that we see on the right-hand side. And also, what's really interesting is even with wine grapes, for any wine lovers out there, if you eat any grapes that are not organically grown, what's really interesting is so what happens if they're sprayed with pesticides, then that person spraying the grapes is doing the job for the grapes. So the grapes will no longer produce resveratrol, which is a natural insecticide that makes the grapes taste disgusting to insects. So if we're spraying the grapes, then we're missing out on resveratrol, which is going to be a very potent antioxidant as well. So we can see, red foods, we have cell protection, huge critical anti-inflammatory benefits, orange foods, cell protection, immune health. And we can see yellow, so we have cognitive protection, more anti-inflammatory benefits. Same with the greens, blue, purples, blacks. And you're not really going to see grains on here. There's a few, you see millet, but pretty much this is going to be vegetables and fruits that are brightly colored. And that's why just eating the full rainbow each day is really important. So I do want to touch on 3 specific examples, too, on how food impacts brain health. So with homocysteine levels, if you're familiar with this is a compound we usually measure in the blood because it's toxic to the blood vessels. And so if it's elevated, it actually can shrink the hippocampus, which is a memory center of the brain, and we do not want to shrink that. So a way to lower homocysteine levels is by ensuring you're getting enough B12, folate, B6, and betaine, which is an amino acid. So that by having the right nutrients and also being able to absorb them will help lower homocysteine. So insulin resistance. It's such a huge problem in this country, and we really are. There's a lot of people who are carbohydrate intolerant, and I do get really excited about this because we can see very definitely how food can have a very favorable impact on insulin. Because since a lot of people are carbohydrate intolerant, we're often eating too many carbs and the wrong carbohydrates. So by focusing mostly on plants and a lot of the leafy greens, we can really help lower insulin and improve insulin sensitivity. There's other lifestyle components that influence this as well. And by reducing insulin resistance, we're less likely to develop type 3 diabetes, which is Alzheimer's disease. And then omega-6s and omega-3s. So these are essential fatty acids. We absolutely have to eat them. We cannot produce them in the body. And what can happen is if you're following more of a standard American diet where you have a lot of grains, you're eating grain-fed meat, it's going to really skew the balance of how many omega-6s you have in your body. And if you're not eating enough fatty fish or even like walnuts, chia seeds, but still you can eat too many omega-6s, which compete with omega-3s, which is going to diminish the amount of omega-3s, and it's going to make you very prone to inflammation. Since more omega-6s make your body more inflammatory or more inflamed, the rate ratio between omega-6s to omega-3s will make you in a state that is less inflamed, which is really important. And another topic, so food as medicine is critical, but number 2, if you haven't heard of intestinal permeability or leaky gut, this is a topic you're going to hear more about, but it's very important that we discuss it as well. Because our intestines, it protects us, it's a barrier to the outside world. So it spans from our mouth all the way to our anus. It's a very long GI tract. But specifically in the small intestine, in the colon, that's where we're susceptible, depending on our lifestyle, depending on how stressed we are, depending on what kind of food we're eating, depending on what kind of medications we're taking, we can actually harm this barrier. And so if you can see, these colorful lines right here are proteins, they're tight junctions. They hold the intestinal lining together. So if this wall breaks down and there's any fissures that's separating the cells, that means now we're going to have undigested food particles leaking into the bloodstream, and that's how we can develop food allergies and food sensitivities. That means now we're malabsorbing nutrients, which is then going to drive this cognitive decline as well. And also, it makes our body more inflamed. Our immune system is on high alert. It can lead to autoimmune diseases and a host of other things. So the health of the gut is critical. And what we're learning as well, and what this slide is showing too, is that if there's any compromise to the intestinal lining, a leaky gut or a leaky intestine can lead to a leaky blood-brain barrier in the brain, which can then allow things to leak into the brain that shouldn't be there and really drive inflammation. So it's really important that we address the whole person, look at the health of their gut, and make sure we're nourishing it and then giving them the right foods. So this is part of what to expect if you work with me. And so what we want to see, so we talked about color. Color is amazing. I can't emphasize it enough. And even just aiming for all 7 colors each day at different meals or snacks. Treating meat like a condiment is especially important if you have the ApoE4 gene. And especially so eating whole foods, detoxifying vegetables, critical to helping aid the body of eliminating toxins. And healthy fats I cannot speak to enough, especially avocados, olives, nuts and seeds, MCT oil as well. And then the last one here, so probiotics and prebiotics, these are really important for the gut health. So eating fermented foods and also the type of fiber from vegetables to feed that gut bacteria, which will help keep the gut from becoming leaky. And then what to avoid. So these foods on the right, these are the foods that lead to inflammation in the gut, then leads to inflammation to the body and the brain. Like gluten can actually harm those tight junctions in the gut. And dairy can also be inflammatory to the gut as well. And of course, sugar. Sugar is in many forms, and you might be surprised to find it in foods that you eat. But sugar is something you'd want to watch out for as well. So this is my last slide, but I just wanted to touch on, I know with the advent of the internet, it's amazing. We have so much nutrition information at our fingertips, but it can be very daunting and overwhelming because, you want something that works for you. There's a lot of different nutrition camps. They don't all agree. And so to be in a functional medicine practice where we can see your labs, we can see your genes, we know what types of foods are going to be best for you, that makes all the difference. Because instead of just traveling through this internet world of nutrition blindly, now you actually have guidance. And I just want to touch on this too, so I know you can see these two books. On the right is Dr. Bredesen's book. On the left is a cookbook that has very similar font. I don't know if you noticed any typos in the title, but it says End of Alzheimer's. And I was surprised, so I actually bought this book, and it contains some of the inflammatory foods in it that Dr. Bredesen says to avoid. So that's just the other part. You might be doing your best to pick something that's going to be right for you when you might be misled, unfortunately, because of what they say on the cover makes it sound like it's the right fit. So I do want to thank you very much for your time and attention. I'm going to turn it over to Victoria, and she's going to talk about stress and sleep. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. That was great. Let's all take a couple nice deep breaths. I need them. They're for me. Okay. So, my name is Victoria, and I'm a health coach at True Health Center for Functional Medicine. And I'm here today to talk about the health coach's role in the memory protection program and how lifestyle changes can really make or break your success with reversing Alzheimer's. So you may be wondering, what is a health coach? And a health coach is someone who facilitates healthy behavior change by challenging you to listen to your inner wisdom, identify your goals and your values, and transform those goals into action. So moments ago, we heard from Christina about how absolutely therapeutic or detrimental food can be for reversing Alzheimer's. It's a pretty big deal. But there are other pieces to the puzzle that need to be addressed when reversing Alzheimer's. And I'm going to talk about two of those components today, sleep and stress. So the interesting thing about sleep is it actually alters our cellular anatomy of the brain. By contracting the brain cells, it allows the fluid to move more freely between the cells. And that's what researchers discovered. And what we can see up here is that the awake brain at the top has very low fluid in it, whereas the sleeping brain down here has an abundant amount of this cerebrospinal fluid. Why is this fluid even important? The fluid's important because it's the brain's way of detoxing from things like amyloid plaque and other cellular wastes that hang out between the cells. And we get this buildup during the day. It's kind of like having a full trash during the day, and then sleep is really taking the trash out at night. So sleep is incredibly important. Another interesting process that happens during sleep, worth mentioning tonight, is a process called autophagy. Autophagy is a fancy word for cellular self-eating. This is a process where the cells will actually take their bad cell components and replace them with new functioning cell components, kind of like getting a hip replacement or a knee replacement. So let's imagine for a moment what it would be like to not have autophagy. it would look a lot like cells carrying around dysfunctional cell components. We wouldn't have room for those new components. It would be much like powering a flashlight with worn out batteries or a broken bulb. It wouldn't really get the job done. And that's what happens with cells when we don't have autophagy. They aren't really able to get their job done. So that's a pretty important part of sleep. That's why sleep is addressed with a health coach and a really important pillar into reversing Alzheimer's, because it really is very important. So who's ready to talk about stress? I am. So did you know that stress is the leading cause to memory loss? That is something to stress about. So raise your hand if you have ever heard of the vagus nerve. Oh, got some smart people out there. So, as you may know, the vagus nerve is the longest nerve in the body, and showing in yellow here, it touches almost every major organ, including the heart, the gut, and what we can't see here is it actually originates in the brain. So we can see that it's pretty far-reaching, and what we know is that because it is so far-reaching, that it plays an important role in almost every function of the body. So when we have an activated and healthy vagus nerve, we know that we're healthy and that we're able to really heal our own bodies. The bad thing, though, is that the vagus nerve can be deactivated pretty easily. And it's deactivated by stress. And I'm not just talking about these major stresses in our lives like a bad diagnosis or somebody we love being in the hospital. I'm talking about things like an overloaded email or an unpaid bill or even a childhood trauma that has never been addressed. So these are all things that can deactivate the vagus nerve. And when the vagus nerve is deactivated, we also see a large increase in cortisol. And as Christina mentioned, that is the stress hormone. And so cortisol is actually very damaging to the neurons found in the hippocampus, which is that memory center of the brain. So we know that a deactivated vagus nerve is directly related to that memory loss. There is good news, though. We can activate the vagus nerve, and we can actually do it pretty easily. But what we want to do is we want to activate the vagus nerve on a regular basis, and we want to build what's called vagal tone. So vagal tone is when we're doing those exercises regularly, and everybody needs kind of a different customized technique. So what does it look like when the vagus nerve is activated? It looks like a balanced immune system. It looks like improved detox pathways, which is pretty important. It looks like a decrease in inflammation and an increase in serotonin, which is a really important neurotransmitter for sleep, mood, and memory. So let's talk about some ways that we can activate our vagus nerve. Some ways we can activate our vagus nerve tonight is we can all hum, we can sing, we could chant. My favorite is we could all laugh. We could also do some deep breathing, which also helps to activate the vagus nerve. The wonderful thing about what we do is we don't just get you to sing in our office or all together. We actually we use heart rate variability to test how toned your vagus nerve is. So what we really want to do, like I mentioned before, is create vagal tone, which is what it is really is stress resilience. So that we can't actually eliminate stress, right? That's not possible. But what we can do is mitigate the damaging effects of stress by having an activated and toned vagus nerve. Doesn't mean we're not going to be stressed out, but what that means is we're not going to have those spikes in cortisol, and we're not going to feel that inflammation. So that's the wonderful thing about having that health coach to not just test your vagus nerve, but also customize an approach for you. Because like I said, everybody's just a little bit different, and everybody needs a different technique. So that's what's great about that. But there are other things that will need to be addressed with a health coach during the program, other than sleep and stress, which are really important, and nutrition. We're also going to talk about other types of exercises, and I'm going to let Melissa take that over. There you you go.
You want to do it for me?
Yeah.
How's everybody doing? Good. We awake? Do we need to do some exercises? Yeah? Okay. So again, I'm Melissa. I'm one of the health coaches here at True Health, kind of partner with Victoria. We do a lot of brainstorming to kind of deliver the best services we can for everybody here. What I'm going to speak about tonight are exercises, that of the body and of the brain, and how they relate to helping reverse cognitive decline. A little graphic there of your brain working out. So before I get started with that, I'd like to just take a minute to define cognition for you. I think most of us have a general idea of what this means, but as it's defined here, we see that it's the mental action or process of acquiring knowledge and understanding through thought, experience, and the senses. And if you take a look at the graphic here, you'll see that it's made up here of cogs and gears. And what I want you to take away from that is that they're all moving pieces. And when one moves, it affects the other. And that's much like what happens with our brain. We want to make sure that that is always flowing properly. When it's not, we do experience cognitive decline. This is a response to the aging of the neurons and the decreased speed at which the brain functions. When we experience cognitive decline, we start to see some symptoms. Some of those symptoms are memory loss and overall brain dysfunction, which can result in frustration. Some of that rears its ugly head when we walk into the kitchen and we stand there for a second going, why did I come in here? Right? Little things like that. Or you go to the grocery store and you knew that you meant to get something, and then you get home and you go, I got everything but that item, right? Those are kind of some simple things, but those start to get more frequent that we see with cognitive decline. So what we can do to help reverse that is train the brain. How many of you knew you could train your brain? All right. Maybe you're already doing some of the stuff I'm going to talk about. So what we do here at True Health is, in the beginning, we need to establish a baseline. We need to run some tests to see kind of where you are cognitively. You'll be able to test your brain's current performance through a variety of assessments that we give with the health coaches. And this gives you a baseline from which to measure your progress as the program continues. So we'll do that a couple of times, and you'll be able to see how some of these exercises, how some of the eating changes, the dietary changes are actually helping make the difference. So how is it that you train your brain? Well, as we know, your brain has muscle memory in a sense, so it can be toned. You just need to know how to exercise it. Dr. Bredesen in his book mentions that we want to practice brain training for about 10 to 20 minutes a day, 5 days per week. He has lots of research that shows that that does help. The way that we have you do this is through Brain HQ. This is an online program that you would log into on a daily basis. The reason that we've chosen Brain HQ is that Dr. Bredesen has found that this ends up having the most sustainable results over time. There are a number of different programs out there, but Brain HQ, like it says here, has all of these different exercises that work all the different functions here. So one thing I like to point out is when you challenge your brain, it can improve, but it can also be frustrating, right? We want to set the bar so that you have some growth. It can be frustrating when you're going in there and doing some of the programs and feeling like, well, I already knew that I couldn't do this, and now you're just showing it to me again, right? But the idea is that you have a team here that's to support you for that, right? We're going to talk to you about how that's going. We're going to give you some strategies. Some of those end up being the stress strategies, right? We'll do a little bit of mindful breathing as you're doing your brain exercises. So we really have some tools here to share with you as well. So as we flex the brain, it's important to flex the body, right? I said we were going to talk about two pieces of exercise. We exercise the brain, now we need to exercise the body. Dr. Bredesen does recommend incorporating 45 to 60 minutes of exercise into your day at least 4 days per week. So is this what we mean by reversing cognitive decline through exercise? No. Do not walk away from this lecture thinking that's the way to do it. This is more like it, right? It's finding an activity that is going to work for you, that you are going to be able to do regularly, consistently, that you take pleasure in at some point, right? We know that there's all kinds of benefits of exercise, right? People can lose weight, you get those endorphins going, but we don't always focus on the benefits of exercise to the brain. There are quite a few here. Regular exercise stimulates your brain to repair synapses and promotes the growth of neurons in the brain. Remember way back at the beginning of the presentation when Dr. Burke was talking about the synapses, those connectors in your brain? We know that there is a particular hormone that is produced as a result of exercise that does just that. So that's pretty cool. Here's a little bit of a graphic to explain that. The first picture here shows that your brain has all kinds of connections, and we want those to remain lit up. We want those to remain connected, right? We know that when they start to break apart, it's kind of like crossing a bridge that you've always crossed, and suddenly you go to cross the bridge, and the bridge is hanging on the other side of the cliff, right? You need to find a way to bridge that again. We don't want to leave you in the gorge. And some of that memory loss we experience in the cognitive decline is essentially that connector that has fallen away. By exercising and training the brain, we can start to help repair that. And of course, through food and all the other things these wonderful people have talked about. Okay? So we do want to help you understand that this is a lot of information, the exercise, the movement, the brain training, and all of those. It's a lot to get going if you're not currently practicing that. It's something that we need to build up to. And that's why having a partnership with the team here is really important. This is not a picture of all of our program participants out there running a triathlon, okay? However, what I do want you to look at is imagining that you are this person right here in red. Right in the middle there, there's a person in red, right? They're out there running the waves. The rest of the people is your team, right? It's your health coach, your front office staff, your doctors, your dietitian, your nurse practitioner, your physician's assistant, essentially all of us out there partnering alongside you, so that as you do get into the ocean, right, and you're feeling the waves and you might get knocked down, we're here to pick you back up. We're here to cheer you on, and we're here to help pave the way. Okay? Sound good? We're going to go run a triathlon? We'll just get you moving. So your job is to take that first step by making a commitment, and that commitment will be to yourself and to your health. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Burke again.
Thank you, Melissa. Yes, thank you. Great job, team. We really are fortunate to work with, I guess I don't need two mics. You don't want to hear me that bad, right? We're really very fortunate to work with such an amazing team of professionals, and that's part of what makes this so successful. So what are the beginning steps in this program? We start with a delightful 4-hour intake process. We split that up over 2 days to make it manageable. We have a very extensive patient history. We use what's called the functional medicine timeline, where we look at not just your medical history, but what has happened in your health in the context of your life experience, because all of those things start to give us clues about where things may have started to break down for your body individually. Then we use the validated assessment tools that the team was talking about in terms of evaluating where you are cognitively, and then the in-depth lab evaluation with multiple vials of blood. There are about 200 data entry points in the RECODE report that we send to Dr. Bredesen to enter into the algorithm to generate the RECODE report. What you saw in the RECODE was actually just page 1. That was the summary page. There's several other pages that will set out what you would need in your program to help heal the brain. The program is a year in length, and it includes about 20 to 30 hours with our collaborative care team. So we split up the program cost into qualified insurance and non-qualified insurance, and all that means is if you have insurance that we are contracted with, so we can bill the insurance for the medical evaluation and management, the things that insurance normally pays for, then that falls under the qualified insurance. So that's pretty much all of the PPOs, Medicare, that type of thing. Or perhaps you might have a non-qualified insurance, which would be an HMO where your providers are restricted, or you might have Kaiser or something of that nature. And so that's the difference in those. So what I want you to think about is the cost of 1 month in a memory care facility runs about $8,000 to $10,000 a month. If we can push that off, if we can save you a month or 3 months or a year or 5 or 10 from when you would need to go into a memory care facility, you have more than made back your investment in recreating brain health in this program. The other thing that I think that's important to think about is we're not used to in our health culture having to pay for things to do with our health other than paying our insurance premiums. We like to think of our health insurance as actually caring for our health, but in this country we really have a sick care system. Our insurance pays for it when we are sick. It doesn't pay for us to get healthy, to learn how to create health in our bodies, or to learn how to be better shepherds of our own health and our brain health in particular for tonight. So when you think about other areas of insurance in our life, what do we expect from our car insurance? Our car insurance doesn't pay when you need to get new tires or replace your windshield wipers or get a new transmission. It pays for the catastrophe when you've had an accident. And the same is true with our homeowners insurance. It doesn't pay for all those lovely things that we have to do, like repainting the house or putting a new roof on or replacing your water heater. We all expect to pay for those things in every other arena of our lives except for health care. And so when our health insurance or our sick care insurance doesn't pay for something, we think that thing doesn't have a value, or it's not something that we need to do. And I'm here to tell you that that is absolutely wrong, and that is why we have such an epidemic of chronic disease. Pills don't fix chronic disease. They mask symptoms, they delay progression sometimes, that's the good thing, but they don't fix what got you there in the first place. That is up to all of us to do. That's maintenance. So the Bredesen Protocol, there's some additional expenses in the program, just we want to be fully transparent. So the Bredesen Protocol Support subscription is a 1-year subscription. When you amortize that over a year, that's about another $80 a month. That includes our access to the Recode report platform multiple times throughout the year, and also it includes your subscription to Brain HQ, so that's not additional. Your personalized supplements are another additional expense. The protocol gives us a very extensive list of what nutrients and anti-inflammatories and things that your body needs based on that big data set that we're collecting, so that we can help to start rebuild those synapses. And then the 2 NeuroQuant MRI brain scans, these are specialized MRI scans, so we cannot use previous MRIs to get this information. This specific type of MRI allows us to actually measure the volume of the hippocampus and other parts, other brain components, so that we can see where you are when we begin the program and then what we have accomplished at the end of the year. Now, from a medical perspective, if it is medically necessary for you to have an MRI, if it's appropriate for you to have a brain MRI, then your insurance will pay for that. The quantitative component of that is usually covered by insurance, but not always. So just so you know what that expectation is. We have negotiated some very, very good cash pricing. So if you are a Kaiser patient, for example, and we can't bill your insurance, we have very good cash pricing for the NeuroQuant MRI, which is, I think, $960, $790. Am I having a dyslexic moment? Yeah, $760. Okay, so very reasonable for an advanced MRI scan. And then there may be some additional functional medicine labs beyond what the Bredesen Protocol asks for, that in the course of evaluating where you are in your health and what may be dysfunctional in the body, that we need to do so that we can right the ship, so to speak, so we can figure out what needs to happen for you. And then any insurance copays or deductibles, if you have a qualified insurance, we are required by law to collect these, and we cannot waive them or write them off. So with that, I will ask Dr. Holthaus back up to join me, and we will open it up for some Q&A.
So before we do that, we want to set some ground rules, because we've got about 15 minutes set aside for this, plus or minus a few. We want to make sure to respect everyone's time and get out at the published time, as close as we can to possible, number one. Number two, this is a topic which it's really easy to go into personal information in front of 60 people inadvertently, and we're trying to respect your HIPAA privacy, your medical privacy, so we want to keep this to kind of program questions and disease-based questions as opposed to your personal medical history. And I just want to say that to respect you all. So with that, yes.
Two questions. One of them is, I know that you've done seminars and protocols for diabetes. In the Alzheimer's protocol, doesn't the Alzheimer's protocol care for diabetes and heart disease and all of that underneath it? If you do this protocol, it's going to help those other ones also. You don't need to do 3 different programs.
Right. So this program is not specifically designed to reverse diabetes, but everything that we're doing is going to address glycotoxicity, the high insulin, and those types of things. But it is not designed specifically to take someone from 20 years of type 2 diabetes into reversing diabetes. But it definitely addresses sugar as a very important part of brain health.
So someone's like pre-diabetes, this is going to help them not even go into it.
That's right. Other questions? Yes?
I have a question about the people that come through the study. So do you have a level of MOCA score that you look at, and some people then they're too far along and you can't turn it around, or are you only looking for early stage or just MCI people, individuals with that, that are showing that, or do you have a certain level at the MOCA score that you cut it?
That's a great question.
Great question.
So I actually asked Dr. Bredesen that question a couple of weeks ago, and his answer was it's proven in what's called SCI, subjective cognitive impairment. So that's kind of the early thing where we're all like, I don't feel like my memory works as good as it used to. Then there's mild cognitive impairment when the others around you are like, your memory doesn't work so good anymore. And then there's early Alzheimer's, moderate Alzheimer's, and then severe Alzheimer's. And the program will work for all of those up to moderate Alzheimer's. Severe Alzheimer's is, kind of like when your car has been totaled. It is too far past where we can regain enough connections, and also the person isn't at a place where they can participate fully in the program. I mean, you see what's involved in being a part of this program. You have to be able to participate. So that being said, the earlier we can get someone, the more profound the success that we can have. But you can still have life-changing success with people who have mild and moderate Alzheimer's disease. With some of the other clinical conditions where you will also see dementia, like Lewy body, Dr. Holthaus mentioned, which is the dementia associated with Parkinson's disease, for example, or frontotemporal dementia, the protocol is currently being studied for those conditions because brain healing is brain healing, but it hasn't been proven to be effective for those. The flip side to that is we have nothing else to offer those people. And we know that this heals damaged brain tissue. So really at that point it just becomes a decision between the patient, the family, and the practitioner whether or not it's something that they just want to try because there isn't anything else for them.
Can I add to that question?
Yeah.
So all the data is going to Dr. Bredesen and the Buck Institute. So again, does he have a level that he says, okay, this is the score, you don't have research thing?
No, there is not a score that eliminates you. It's ability to participate in the program.
And be able to do it on their own?
We have people...
No, with assistance.
Okay.
With
Yeah, they don't have to be, a care partner, family members. And we have one amazing family that literally has embraced the divide and conquer. Each grandchild, you guys can speak to this because you know it better than I do, but each grandchild is assigned a brain training day, right, on the computer, because the computer was really hard. So each grandchild has a brain training day that they help, and then the daughter is cooking, and son is helping with stress management. I mean, the whole family is involved because the person themselves isn't able to navigate the planning required to do all of that. So it just requires that they're willing to go along with as much as possible. And that's another thing too that's really important to mention, is that you don't have to do every single last piece of the program for this to be effective. You go back to the 36 holes or the 45 holes or the 69 holes or however many we're at now, and if you imagine that roof, if we can patch 25 of those holes, that's going to be a whole lot better than if you're only patching one. So the more you can do, the better the results, but you don't have to do everything to get results.
Mm-hmm. The MOCA, it's the Montreal Cognitive Assessment, is what she's referring to, and there is no score that's a disqualifier. We have a few people that are participating in the single digits. Anything less than a 26 out of 30 is considered abnormal. And so we try not to discriminate based on a number. It really has come down to, just with practical application and trying to implement this program, can they participate? Can they engage in what we're trying to do? Otherwise, we have to be individualized with our recommendations.
So the
it's a great
data
question.
still can go to the Buck Institute to get a larger N so they can have more credibility in the biomedical side?
Right, right. And even if they don't get all 200 data points entered into the RECODE report, it will come back with information that helps us do a personalized approach for that person.
Right.
It's a great question.
Yeah, great question. Yeah.
What causes the fissures in the cells of the small intestine that lead to the leaky gut?
A whole lot of things. All of the potential inputs for inflammation can cause that. So stress, toxins, allergies, poor food choices. We call the standard American diet the SAD diet. It's also can be known as the crap diet, bad carbohydrates, refined processed foods. What's the A? I'm missing the A. Anyway, so foods that are very pro-inflammatory, infections, imbalances in the gut microbiome.
Stress.
Yep.
Stress is
a
big one. Too much alcohol. Lots of things will do it. Food
anti-inflammatories, certain medications. Yeah, the list is long.
Antacids.
Is the diet that you use based on the ketogenic diet? And how do you... The book is very vague about the ketogenic diet.
Yeah.
It really doesn't give you too much information on it.
Yeah, it's not really a good thing to maverick on your own. So Dr. Bredesen did that on purpose because he didn't want people just trying to do that on their own without supervision, because it can be not safe if you do that. So there's a wide range of dietary applications that we use, and it's really based on the needs of the client, the desires of the client, and then what they're capable of incorporating into their life change. And I don't know, Christina, maybe do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, so based on, so based on where a person's at, we can go towards a ketogenic. Sorry, you can't even hear me. Is this better?
Yeah.
Okay, so depending on where a person's at and if they're willing to cook, we will go towards a ketogenic diet if that is right for that person.
But is ketosis important to this diet?
Yes. So in Appendix B, which is in the back of the book, it does talk about nutritional ketosis, the range, and we'll use a ketone meter. You'll check it fasting, so we can measure that in every morning. Once you get your foods into, you're eating a certain way, and we can get you into this nutritional ketosis consistently. Then you don't have to check it every day. But yes, we are looking at nutritional or ketones.
An important part of the ketogenic diet is macros, and he doesn't list any macros at all, so you have no idea.
Yeah,
that's
where it's my fun job.
Do it on your own.
That's what you're paying for.
Yeah, because if we're not using dairy as one of the fat sources, because with ketogenic, fat is primary, protein's supposed to be moderate, and then carbs are very low. But that's where we have to tweak it, because I don't want a person to be too low in vegetables. We have to find the sweet spot. Yeah, so we would work out the specifics. I would give you the macronutrient parameters, calorie parameters, everything.
Part of the reason he didn't get into that was because there is no one-size-fits-all diet for this disease or this group of people in this small room here. So the individualization comes from licensed professionals that are really, really smart at knowing how to get those same physiologic endpoints in a whole bunch of different ways depending on the individual that's sitting in front of them. So it's just not as easy as a one size.
And it's also not required that you do a ketogenic diet too. So there's a flip side to that.
Right.
Because not everyone is willing to do what you have to do that.
I want to piggyback questions up.
Okay, hang on 1 second, because he's raised his hand a few times. So I'll let you do that quickly, and then I'll grab him. I'll get you next, sir.
Is there a magic vitamin that you can take to increase that big long nerve?
No magic vitamin for that.
Oh, cute. Go ahead.
On the ketogenic diet, are you trained in working with vegans?
Ooh, we have a vegan on staff, and I do have a vegan dietary plan. It's tricky. It's very tricky.
Yeah.
We're
Great.
going to have one more question over here.
Yes, thank you.
I just was wondering about the 12-month period. Now, you mentioned that if they don't want to stay the entire span, but what if is there something beyond 12 months that is accessible, or that you have foreseen?
His program, yes, his program is designed to be a year, and that's what the subscription is for.
And then it can always extend beyond that as need dictates. Exactly.
That's what I was wondering.
Yeah, no, we don't cut you off.
No. Yeah.
All right, so that's going to be the end of our Q&A for Upstage. If you have any additional questions, we will try our best as staff to answer for them. If you are interested in joining tonight, we are taking deposits of $1,500. We can only take 8 to 10 enrollees per month to make sure that we're devoting as much time to you as individuals. We don't want to spread ourselves too thin. This is a very integrated program. We have our staff in the back who can help you answer questions, as well as help with intake forms and also collect your information to set up initial appointments. And if anything, we want you to walk away tonight knowing that cognitive decline is reversible, preventable, and most of all, that there's hope. Thank you so much for coming, you guys.